Alright, so just a couple days ago I pulled some eggs out of the incubator and cut them open and peeked inside, and let me tell you, it was really difficult trying to figure out which ones were which just from cutting them open a little bit. And since it's been a couple days, I'm thinking a lot of those snakes are probably out of the egg, and I'm hoping we can set them all up in the hatchling rack. I'm hoping most or all of them are actually out of the egg, and the pairing on that one was a scaleless head male crossed with a lesser female. So the results will be, on average, it'll be 50% lesser, 50% scaleless heads. So we'll get some lesser scaleless heads, some normal scaleless heads, and probably just some straight lessers and some straight normals. It'll be interesting to see what the results are. So let's check out those snakes. All right, so this is it. This is the moment of truth. Let's take a look and see what we have here. Hopefully they're all out of the eggs, and oh wow, they're actually not all out of the eggs. These two still have their heads poking out a little. That is interesting. So let's see what we have here. Now I can definitely say now it is a lot easier to tell which is which is a lesser and which is not a lesser. So take a look at this. This is basically a normal ball python. You can definitely tell now that it's out of the egg, and you compare that to this one right here. This is a lesser. You can definitely tell the difference between a lesser and a normal now that they're completely out of the eggs. So it looks like, just at a quick glance here, it looks like these two are lessers. It looks like this is a normal, looks like this is a normal, this is a normal, this one's normal, and looks like this one is lesser still in the egg. You can tell the head color is a little bit lighter on the lesser, so you can definitely tell which one's which. And look at this. This is a normal, but obviously this one you can see is a scaleless head. You can see the scales missing from the top of the head. So that is the difference. You know, if it didn't have the scales missing from the head, this would be like maybe a $50 snake, and now that it has scales missing from the head, it's probably a $500 snake. And it really depends if it's a male or a female. So, you know, usually the females are worth more than the males, because everybody wants the females to breed. You know, essentially the females lay eggs and the males don't. So I'm hoping this one is actually, well, I guess it doesn't really matter because I have so many scaleless head females that I'll probably sell all of them except if I get a lesser scaleless head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these two in the egg and put them back in the incubator for a little bit. But before we do that, I'm going to go through each and every one, take a closer look, figure out if we actually hit the lesser scaleless head, and then I'm going to set them up in the hatchling rack. All right, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to get a paper towel and get it wet, because this is kind of a messy job here. And I'm getting messy already. It's getting kind of dirty already. So first thing I want to do is pull out one of these lessers, and let's take a closer look at this lesser here. Let me zoom in just a little bit with the lens. So this one is definitely a lesser, and at first glance I would say it doesn't look like it is a scaleless head. So if you look at the head, it doesn't really look like it's missing any scales from the top of the head. But sometimes that can trick you. And the way it can trick you is there's a second way you can tell if this is a scaleless head. Some of them actually don't have any scales missing from the head, but they're still scaleless heads. And the way that you tell is you look at the very last scale right before the vent. It's essentially right where they go to the bathroom. and if that vent scale is split into two, then it is a scaleless head. And if it's not, it is not a scaleless head. And I don't know if you can see that very last scale right there. if you can see that, that is not split in two, which means unfortunately this is not a scaleless head ball python, just a lesser. But it's a good looking lesser anyways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up in my hatchling rack. So these are the tubs that I use for my hatchlings. These are from my ARS 1039 hybrid that fits essentially any ARS 10 series. I actually have an ARS 1065, holds 65 hatchlings. This tub will fit into that rack as well. And I think they're really, this is kind of the ideal size for hatchlings. It has a lot of room, you know, from side to side. I've seen some that are a lot narrower, and I really don't like them because a lot of times the hatchlings will grow up quite a bit, reach a pretty big size in here, and it's good to actually have extra room that they can actually grow up into. You can definitely tell this one has not shed. If you look at it, it is really kind of, you can definitely tell it's kind of, looks kind of dry. It's because it hasn't shed out. So when I put them up in the rack, up in the hatchling rack, what I'm really waiting for is this snake, for this snake to shed out. And then once it sheds out, it's usually about a week or so before I offer the very first meal. And the very first meal for hatchlings has to be, 100% has to be a live mouse, like a hopper, or a little bit smaller than a hopper is what I use. Kind of like a, well, it's not really like a fuzzy size, but it's between a fuzzy and a hopper is what I like, if you can actually get the right size. And luckily, I raised my own rodents, so getting mice for these guys is not a problem. But just take a look at how beautiful that snake is. Really awesome. And it's kind of weird that his skin is kind of really wrinkly. I've never really seen one that wrinkly. Look at how wrinkly it is. It's kind of interesting. He's got some good body weight. It's just really kind of an interesting skin condition on that snake. So I'm going to go ahead and put that one up in my hatchling rack, and let's work on the next one. All right, so I'm really hoping one of these lessers is a scaleless head, because I want to go for the totally scaleless blue-eyed leucistic, which would be pretty awesome. And this guy is really super dry. I can't believe it looks almost like he's got vermiculite stuck to him. So what I want to do is I'm just going to spray this guy down just a little bit here. Kind of hydrate him a little bit, get some of that vermiculite off. And let's take a better look at him. He's kind of freaking out from the water now. That is a good looking snake. That is, you can definitely tell a lesser once they're out of the egg. Take a look at that. Beautiful snake. So the lesser essentially is in the blue-eyed leucistic. If you breed two lessers together, 25% will be an all-white snake with blue eyes, which is pretty awesome. If we take a look at the head on this one, hey, look at this. Hey, this one looks like a scaleless head lesser. Take a look at that head right there, if you can see it. All right, that is what I was shooting for. And I actually have two clutches of scaleless head crossed to a lesser, and I'm pretty sure I have another clutch with that scaleless head. No, actually I don't. I gave one of my lessers the year off. I'm thinking about a different pairing. So this was, you know, a lot of times these are one-time, one-shot deals. And if I get what I'm looking for, I will never pair my scaleless head with my lesser again. I'll move on to other projects. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm just shooting for one. If it's a male or female, it doesn't really matter. I got what I was looking for. And I can breed this into like one of my female scaleless heads and get like an all scaleless lesser, and then I can breed a couple of those together too. So there's a couple different ways I can go after the completely scaleless blue-eyed leucistic. So if we take a look at the vent on this one, I really wanted to show you the split vent scale on this so you can kind of get an idea of how it's split. And it's it's really hard to tell. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's a really small scale right by the vent. And if you can see that it actually is split, the very last scale is actually split on that one. If you can see that. It's essentially split up and down right in the middle. You almost can't even see it because it's almost too small of a snake to actually see that, but it's split up and down right through, and it splits the vent scale into two separate scales. So that is exactly what I was shooting for. This is definitely going to be one of my holdbacks. That is really awesome. Alright, so it looks like we don't have any more lessers that are completely out. It looks like this one's a lesser just based on the head color. This one's kind of an interesting normal, but I would say probably all three of these are normals. It's interesting, the thing that's really interesting about this is, take a look at this normal, it has highlights like right here. I actually have another snake like this, kind of with the highlights down through the top, and the other ones don't really have as much. I guess this one has a little bit. Some of them are completely dark with no highlights. I'm not sure exactly what that's from, just a different variation of a normal. So what I'm going to do is let's just grab one and let's take a look, and we'll see if this one is a scaleless head is what I'm really looking for. So this one, it looks like from the head, I would say this one just does not look like it has any scales missing from the head. The interesting thing too is, you know, I'm looking back at some of these videos, and when I hold it up to the lens, you guys can actually see it better than I can. So sometimes I'm wrong, and then you're like, that is totally obvious. It's you know, one thing, and I said it was another, which is kind of interesting. The camera sometimes is better than me here in real life under this lighting that I have. So another thing that I'm going to look at is the vent scale, the very last vent scale, and to me, it's so hard. But you know, they can kind of trick you. So I'm actually going to go back and double check and make sure that that vent scale is what I think it is, because it looks like it is just a single scale at the vent, which means this is just a normal ball python, not a scaleless head. Alright, so I have to admit that this part right here is probably the most exciting part of breeding ball pythons, going through and seeing what you have. And it's pretty amazing, because it's almost like, I guess it's essentially like getting free snakes because you're producing them yourself and you never know what you're getting. It's kind of like a grab bag of free snakes when you're breeding ball pythons. It is pretty exciting. So I am taking a look at this one, and I would say from first glance, you know, actually the first year I got some of these wrong because I had to look at the split vent scale to get them right, and sometimes the scale that's missing from the head is so small that you can't even see it. I would say this one doesn't look like, to me, like it's missing any scales on the head. So let's take a look at the tail here, and I almost these scales are almost too small to tell. I almost need like a magnifying glass or something, like a dissection microscope, or maybe you can tell better on the camera. But to me, that doesn't look like it's split. I think this is just another normal ball python. This one has quite a bit more yellow, I would say, than a lot of my normals. Some of them don't have this much yellow in the pattern. As a matter of fact, I had one whole clutch that I thought was all pastels, and it had a lot of yellow through all the normals. This is kind of similar to what that was. This is quite a bit of yellow for a normal. It's pretty impressive, and a lot of times you'll see that when they're smaller, and a lot of times the smaller snakes will be a lot brighter, and then as they mature, it kind of fades and fades. And it's pretty typical of especially some of your pastels and some normals and stuff like that. That is a really good looking normal. Alright, so let's see what else we have in this grab bag of snakes. I am actually going to take some of these shells out because, You definitely don't want to keep them in the incubator very long because the shells can get kind of stinky. So let's take a look at this one last snake. And those two we'll put back in the incubator for a little bit longer. And let's take a look at this one. This is another nice looking snake. Definitely not a lesser. It's definitely a normal. Oh yeah, this is the one we looked at earlier. Very high expression scaleless head. That is pretty obvious right there. Has a big scale missing right from the top of the head. So this one's definitely a scaleless head. And we're getting quite a few scaleless head in my collection. I'm getting so many. It's like taking over my collection with the scaleless heads. And this one, let's see if we can see. Well, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, it's split. You can barely see it. That vent scale is split into two. If you can see it. I don't know how good you can see that. But it's interesting that so far it's been a foolproof way to tell if you have a scaleless head. I had a couple scaleless heads last year that you couldn't even tell. The scale missing on top of the head was so small you couldn't even tell that it was missing a scale until you actually looked at the split vent scale, and then you realized it was a scaleless head, and then you went back and then looked closer at the head, and sure enough it was missing a really small scale. But there you have it. That is another scaleless head to add to my collection. Alright, so what I'm going to do with these last two snakes is I'm going to put them back in the incubator, and essentially I seal everything with this press and seal. It's perfectly safe for hatchlings. It can breathe, the oxygen can pass through this stuff, but it holds in the moisture. I guess it's almost like a Gore-Tex kind of a fabric. And it's pretty amazing. I've never actually had a problem with this, with the snakes breathing, as far as not getting enough air or anything, and it works fantastic, which is kind of weird. I don't have any holes in the boxes or anything in the sides, and it breathes just fine. And this isn't really a really tight fitting lid. It definitely has a lot of holes around the sides, so it definitely can get a lot of air, which is, I always thought it was interesting. At first when I saw the press and seal, I was like, there's no way those snakes can breathe, and then I tried it. Sure enough, I've been trying it for a couple of years. It works fantastic. Alright, so my hatchling rack is definitely starting to fill up. I'm getting quite a few baby snakes in here, and this is how I have them set up. I have a Pro Coco coconut husk that I use for the substrate. I keep it damp so they have enough humidity where they can shed. I just use these little, I think this is like an 8-ounce deli cup that these take, and this is the scaleless head we just set up. So essentially what they do is they sit in the back on a 90-degree hot spot. There's some heaters that run in the back of this rack, and you can see here's my scaleless head lesser. It seems like once you put them on that heat in the back, then they're pretty much stuck on the heat, and they usually only come up on the other to go to the bathroom. So here's some of the other stuff. This is a previous clutch we had, and this is kind of interesting. Let's take a quick look at some of these snakes. So this one, we thought these might be pastel bamboos, but now that I'm looking at them, I'm not so sure if these have pastel or not. This one actually looks quite a bit different now that it's shed out, so I'm not sure if those actually have pastel. They actually look a lot darker now that they shed, but it's always interesting. We'll wait a little bit longer on those to make sure, and sometimes you can tell once they mature a little bit is they really start changing. This guy hasn't even shed out. This is from my previous clutch. This is a beautiful pastel. Look at that. That is extremely bright yellow. Just a beautiful snake. That one's really good looking. And then I have some fires. I should show you these fires. These actually, So what I do is I kind of have a little system here. These little clips are the number of meals that they have eaten. So this one's eaten 5 meals. Usually I don't sell snake until it's had 6 meals. So these are like almost ready to go. This one's had 4. This is a fire. And look at how, let me see if I can get this fire down here. Look at how intense this fire looks. That is a crazy looking snake. I've never actually produced fires. They are really good looking. Really bright yellow, almost like a pastel. If you breed 2 fires together, you get a super fire, which is an all white snake with black eyes, which is pretty cool. And that is pretty much all I have here. I have some normals. You can see some of these normals from this clutch. Haven't even shed out yet. Here's my little runt normal, little tiny runt. This is like my smallest, skinniest ball python in the whole lot. And that one hasn't shed out, so you don't even feed him yet. I actually tried to feed this one just for a little bit and didn't eat it. Pastel 8, actually this is a different pastel. Let me move my chair over here. This is kind of interesting. This one's a little bit different than the other pastel. Not quite as bright, but definitely a lot different. It's a completely different pastel. That is one good looking pastel. Really good looking snake. So I'm getting some really cool stuff. And I'd say I probably have another 60 eggs in the incubator. So I definitely have a lot more stuff coming up. All right, so I took a quick peek in the incubator and it looks like the next clutch of ball python eggs is starting to hatch. I saw one little snake with his head peeking out of the egg. So you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking tomorrow we can go back and look at these 2 snakes that are still in the egg. Hopefully they'll be out. And then we can do some egg cutting on the other eggs, which would be pretty awesome. And the pairing on that one was actually a lemon blast, which is a pastel pinstripe, and I crossed that with my pastel desert ghost male. So essentially what I'm hoping for on that clutch is the super pastel pinstripe, and of course everything in the clutch will be het desert ghost. And then it would be kind of cool to take my, it would be like a super blast het desert ghost, cross it back with maybe my female pastel spider desert ghost, and I would get a super blast spider desert ghost. That'd be kind of the crown jewel out of that pairing eventually once we get down the road. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.